Dear student, welcome to this session where I will be speaking on ethics with respect to science and research. The question of when ethics has come into the picture, we need to understand really what's the meaning of ethics. And when we talk about ethics in science, and if we go back to the history, it's less than 500 years ago, science was a dangerous game, a dangerous business. Why I say this? In 1600, all of you know about that Italian monk, Giordano Bruno, right? Who was sentenced to death and burned at the stake because he believed in free thinking in philosophy and science. Galileo Galilei narrowly avoided the same fate by public renouncing his support of Copernicus' heliocentric view. But what about the state today? Of course, the days of autodeifs are over, and modern science has an important influence on the development of society as a whole, compared with the days of the ill-fated Bruno. So with this small background, so when we speak about ethics, there's another term which is similar to it, comes in our mind, which is called morality. So ethics and morality, these two terminologies, they speak of the same thing. What do they say? They say about what is bad, what is good, what is wrong, and what is right. So when we talk about what is good and bad with respect to science and research, and you know that I will be talking in series about the publications related to fakeness, means fake publications, predatory publication, and why people opt for this type of predatory publication. So is there any ethics in publication? So all these will be summed up in a series of lectures. So my first lecture and the first slide speaks about, see, this is a stone seesaw, and at the two ends you find a balancing act, and these two balances, these two big chunks of stones can be interplaced. Means this particular stone could be put here, and this series of such stones can be put here, and you can have a balance. And that's actually the two terms that I talked about. The ethics and another heap of stone is morality. Ultimately, these are two synonymous, but there are differences. What are those? Generally, the term ethics and morality are used interchangeably. Although a few different communities like academic, legal, religious, for example, they will occasionally make a distinction between these two words, ethics and morality. Both this morality and ethics, they loosely have to do with distinguishing the difference between what is good and what is bad, or what is right and what is wrong. So these two terminology morality and ethics, they loosely distinguish the difference between good and bad, right and wrong. Now, many people think of morality as something that's personal and normative. Whereas when you talk about ethics, it is the standards of good and bad, and distinguished by a certain community or social setting. So it is important to consider how the two terms have been used in discourse in different fields so that we can consider the connotations of both terms. For example, morality has a Christian connotation to many Westerners, since moral theology is prominent in the church. Similarly, ethics is the term used in conjunction with business, medicine, or law. In these cases, ethics serves as a personal code of conduct for people working in those fields, and the ethics themselves are often highly debated and contentious. So these connotations have helped guide the distinction between morality and ethics. Ethicists, that means the person who practices ethics, who propagates what ethics is about. So these ethicists today, however, use the terms interchangeably. If they do want to differentiate morality from ethics, the onus is on the ethicist to state the definitions of both terms. Ultimately, the distinctions between the two is as substantial when you draw a line in the sand. So when you draw a line on the sand, that line could vanish in course of time. But you can make a line which you can draw it in the sand. So let's talk about the source of this particular word called ethics. Or how did this ethics generated, this terminology and the explanation of ethics have generated. That means you need to understand the genesis of this particular term, ethics. Ethics are external standards that are provided by institutions, groups, or culture to which an individual belongs. So scientific community is also a group, right? For example, the lawyers are the group, policemen, doctors, all they have to follow an ethical code laid down by their profession, regardless of their feelings or preferences. Ethics can also be considered as a social system or a framework for acceptable behavior. So there must be a consistency and as well as flexibility. So ethics are very consistent within a certain context, but can vary greatly between contexts. For example, the ethics of the medical profession in the 21st century are generally consistent and do not change from hospital to hospital, but they are different from the ethics of the 21st century legal profession. Now we talk about the ethics in science. What is the misconduct in scientific research? So when science has been serving the society to a great extent, there are possibilities that this science could meddle into something wrong, something bad, something good, something bad. So therefore, ethics in science is very important to understand what is ethics in science. Now this gentleman, Karl Popper, a great scientific philosopher, and I quote him like this: to be sure, it is possible to prove the rightness of any ethical principles, or even to argue in favor in just the manner in which we argue in favor of a scientific statement. Now this is very interesting. Ethics is not a science. But although there is no rational basis of ethics, but there is an ethical basis of science and of rationalism. You will gradually understand what Karl Popper meant about ethics in science. So if you look at this picture, see, when there is rightness, so this is a fine balance upon which the science, this is a common balance, okay? And on the fulcrum, when you have two pans at the two ends, it has to balance. So always there is the balance tilt towards the rightness, and the wrong is high up. So the pan balance has greater weight in the right side. So what is good research? Now you should understand what is good ethics, then you must understand what is good science. The good science starts with problem selection, and there must be very smart objectives. And when you have put the objectives and you start investigating, there must be certain proper methodology. So after application of the methodology, when you come out with the result, then you analyze the result and you confer something. So there must be a proper analysis of your results. So when we talk about the good science, right, we start with the problem selection. So if your problem selection is very smart enough, then you have a very smart objectives. And in order to fulfill this objective, you have to imply certain methods. And if all these methodologies are proper, so you get into the result section. So after application, you get the result. And when the results are being analyzed properly, the answer or the conclusion drawn out of this good science is also good. So good ethics is related to good science. What is that? You have to have a fair subject selection. And when we talk about the good ethics, there will be favorable risk is to benefit ratio. And you can go for an independent review, and there will be an informed consent out of it. So these four important points constitutes what is good ethics. So fair subject selection, favorable risk-benefit ratio, independent review, and informed consent. So you see, science and ethics, as research and technology are changing society and the way we live, scientists can no longer claim that, science is neutral, but must consider the ethical and social aspects of their work. So scientific progress, which is the driving force for the majority of the changes that we are witnessing in the 20th century, that we have witnessed, okay, it requires a critical mind. And what do we call critical mind? It should be free of prejudice and open to new ways of thinking. So there has been a rapid development of modern science since the Renaissance. Why? Because it is due to mainly to the postulates that scientific theories should be independent of theological or religious beliefs. And if you look back to the 17th and 18th century, the knowledge was mainly exchanged through scientific academies, which disseminated new theories, and thus it accelerated the scientific progress. At the beginning of the 19th century, there was a remarkable rise in academic research at universities, which is also labeled as pure research. So over the years, the style and practice of science has seen a considerable transformation. The pursuit of science has moved from an individual's curiosity-driven inquiry to an institutionalized system with a subject focus, centralized funding, and cadre-based career option. So may I repeat this and try to make you understand what it is. Means the pursuit of science is driven or moved by an individual curiosity, and this had led to an institutionalized system with a subject focus, astronomical science, okay, biological science, and then again you find the division into that, the physics, the chemistry. So this has become also, this research to pursue require funding, so there must be a central funding for it. So this change of structure, this has led to competitions in both intellectual and personal domain, and in this in turn has led to an increase of unethical practices. Let me give you an example. So when science has moved to an institutionalized system, so there is a competition between two institutes. What is that competition? The competition to publish their results and gain the importance in the society. And when we try to mark them, evaluate them, grade them, then finally you are leading these universities to compete with each other in both intellectual and as well as in the personal domain. And when there is a competition, and when there is unfair competition, unethical practices drive in. So increasing number of students into this system and the need for quality education have resulted in several compromises. So they are in the manner in which the admission to the institutions are made, the manner in which the education is imparted, and also the manner in which the examination and evaluations are conducted. In each level, there are several compromises. And at each stage, therefore, certain unethical practices are abound. So in research area, there are issues of plagiarism. What is meant by plagiarism? It is just a blunt copy and paste of others' work into your text. So you can plagiarize results, you can plagiarize texts. So there are issues of copy, plagiarism. And when there is a plagiarism, you want to publish this plagiarized paper, you will never ever try to put your document under review, under a strict review. So you always try to find something where your text can be published. So we look for predatory journals. I'll come to all these points later on. Predatory journals are the journals which predates on original good journals. So they hide and they invite the authors and they set the trap. Now, there are issues of manufacture of data without experiment. So you do not conduct the experiment, but you get the data. So you are manufacturing data without experiment. So these are the issues. Then after, you have manufactured the data and you are going into the publication, you are taking in some ghost or guest authorship. To issues of use of money as a surrogate for quality. So you are compromising, you are giving some money, and in return you are getting your text published in journals which we call as predatory journals. So this is highly unethical. And all this that I spoke about plagiarism, predatory journals, manufacture of data without experiment, ghost or guest authorship to issues of use of money as a surrogate for quality, and all these have led to erosion of values and ethical standard. So if you look at this bell-shaped curve, you will be finding several points here. Bias, fraud, you are not undergoing peer review. That means your text is not reviewed the persons of the same expertise. So plagiarism, okay, the duty, your honesty, misconduct, these are all falling down. So when you go for a more bias, fraud, peer review, plagiarism, so honesty, misconduct, and the responsibility drops down. So all such unethical practices, they're rooted in the simple desire for shortcuts to success and the innate aspiration of the less meritorious to rise higher in one's profession. Very important point. So when the less meritorious persons are in an institution and they want to rise high in their profession, they are going to practice these unethical things. Truth, which is the goal of science, they stand totally compromised. So you are compromising with the truth. You are manufacturing data. You are introducing ghost authors. You are plagiarizing. So you are breaking all the ethical principles. So in the modern sense, the formal definition of science, which came in 1831 to the British Association of Advancement of Science, it was a new philosophy constrained by both the phenomenon that were inquired into and the methodology used for such an inquiry. Till the 17th century, the sole aim of science was to understand the structure and functioning of nature and discover a set of laws and axioms that could explain the working of everything. So that was the state of science in 17th century. And these studies, they led to the discovery of the natural laws, which dictated and explained the behavior of nature. Francis Bacon and later René Descartes, the French mathematician and probably the first philosopher of science, added one more aim, formally and emphatically. What was it? It was suggested that science should be useful to man. Why? In developing creature comforts through control and exploitation of natural resources and phenomena. J.D. Burnell in 1954, he was trying to understand and he came out with this, that it was suggested that science should be useful to man. And from then on, fundamental science and application-oriented science. And application-oriented science, which we often call as technology, they became the twin sciences. So fundamental science and application-oriented science, that is science and technology, they became twins. So natural science, they comprised of three branches: physics, chemistry, and biology. Each of these had a singular aim of knowing the truth about nature, akin to other systems of philosophy. Right? So in other words of Vannevar Bush, who is one of the architects of American science policy, he says that science is amoral. Means it is neither moral nor immortal. It is man who misuses science and technology and interprets science to general public, and that aggravates this perceived conflict between science use and abuse. So let me just recollect that what is spoken by amoral. Means science is neither moral nor immoral because it is man who misuses science and technology and misinterprets science to general public. So the society now needs to resolve this problem. The problem of conflict with native wisdom in non-confrontational manner and with a process that seeks peace and harmony in society. When we look back to the ancient Indian philosophical traditions, so we say when there is a conflict we call Bada. Then there is a protest, Prativada. And then Bidondovada. Tale Bad, Bidondo or Pratibad. And the Greek tradition of Plato has also told us that debate and discussion across the table alone can solve problems and resolve contradiction. So three important terminologies is coming into the picture: morals, ethics, and laws. If we look back to the Cambridge University Dictionary of English, the word ethics implies a system of accepted beliefs that control behavior, especially a system that is based on morals. The word morality, it implies a set of personal or social standards for good or bad behavior and character, or the quality of being right, honest, or acceptable. So our behavior and attitude as individuals is regulated by individual conscience or a sense of morality. So if we boil down to this concept that morality is based on an individual's mindset and a basic human instinct, and humans carry a time invariant sense of morality and ethics, and these are expressed explicitly, moderately, subtly, or even expressed to ensure social peace. So with passage of time, human societies and political nations evolved and have clearly stated laws. Laws could be oral, it could be written, and these laws regulate the expected social conduct in public space. These laws are covered under a systematic, which you call as crime and punishment framework. So if somebody performs a crime that goes out of this, he will be punished. While Shabhavik Dharma, That means this should dictate the human behavioral norms and judgments. Science, being an organized activity in search of truth, has a mandatory set of norms. And these are scientific temper and are written in the form of scientific methods to be followed by every practicing scientist. So there are scientific temper, these are known as scientific temper and are written in the form of scientific methods to be followed by every practicing scientist. So scientific methods to be followed by every practicing scientist, if this becomes the logo. So in practice, however, this is not followed by many. The reason for this deviant behavior ought to be found in the way the scientific activity is structured and conducted. So let me take up 4 important points. First, that the science is practiced in structured departments, centers, professional societies, etc., and only occasionally by an individual in isolation. This is the first point. Second, that science, especially experimental science, is carried out largely using public and private funds through projects. Third, that scientists receive various awards and recognition from their own scientific societies and also from societies in general. Fourth, that the peer pressure adds another layer of major influence on scientists. Besides the pristine pursuit of science for knowledge, science is now a major career option for the middle class. So you see, you find a flux of graduate students coming into the conceptual framework in research ethics. So you get graduate students, and those are mentored through a program, and there is a faculty capacity building in science and engineering curricula, and the end product of the entire system, that is science and engineering community in research, having ethical awareness and commitment, we find ethically motivated and committed researchers in science and engineering. So I'll move to the second part of the lecture in my next presentation.